history of the Tottenham. They always created many chances and scored so much, but at the end they miss always something to arrive at the end. We believe in the history. I think also.
Arsenal fans, did you learn anything new in the recent North London derby in which we won a 0-0? I don't know if you did, but I think I learned a few things. One, North London will always be red. It will never be white unless the likes of Tommy Robertson get their way. But that's got nothing to do with football. Spurs couldn't beat a depleted Arsenal team, which you can't even say was our B team. It probably was our C team. And fundamentally, Spurs are crap. And again, much has been the theme of playing Tottenham Hotspur. Oh, we had possession. We dominated the game. We did this. We did that. Take it from an Arsenal fan. Again, my club has always been a possession-based club. In my 29 years, there was a lot of times the performance that you lot played that would have happened to us. Possession is king. Possession is everything. It's what you do with the ball and without the ball that makes the difference, and that's what led to our victory and ultimately their demise. They also say 3 is a magic number. I guess it must be, because that's now 3 wins on the spin at that toilet of a stadium. Our away form continues. I mean, how good is our away form, people? We've come a long way from the dark days when it was a given that we would not compete against the top 4 to top 6. Sorry to trigger on-screen PTSD. We haven't, got and reached the promised land yet, but we're firmly on that. And Arsenal are set piece FC. Simultaneously, Spurs are one of the worst teams in terms of set pieces. So it's poetic that we obviously scored, and it was written on the stars. Shout out Gabriel for that. For me in particular, people, I don't know how you lot feel, but I would put that performance as not necessarily a glamorous one. It was so beautiful in my opinion. And what I mean by that is it was so ugly. It was beautiful. It was street smart. It was a professional performance. We had a deep block. We took the sting and the tempo of the game out of it anytime we could, because obviously Spurs are going to be highly emotional. We took our chance. We did have other chances, but we took our chance. Ultimately, we managed the game well, and we, have clawed some points back after the disappointing result against Brighton and provided ourselves with an insurance policy heading into a tough week of football. It starts with the Champions League against Atalanta, and then it's the big one against Manchester City. Big up everybody connected to the football club in all aspects, because we did our thing. But I want to allow myself to humor you lot and just talk about some things I picked up watching the game again. Don't forget to smash the like button. We're chasing 70,000 subscribers, people. We need that engagement. So let's begin. Going into a North London derby with a depleted side, we need our defenders to stand up tall. Goals win games. So shout out to Gabriel. Defense wins titles. So also shout out to Gabriel and Cole. We've got 2 brilliant centre backs, don't we, in Saliba and Gabriel. I'm happy Gabriel scored. I'm obviously happy we kept a clean sheet, and I'm happy with our defensive performances in general. But Gabriel in particular, a lot of Arsenal fans have been on his back in the early point of the season, people. So it's nice that, people remember how good he is and what a duo Saliba and Gabriel are. Gabriel's a quality player. I think he's quite underrated. I think, when he initially signed for Arsenal Football Club, he did make mistakes, and that reputation has unfortunately stuck with him. But what you cannot do is act like he's not one of the best centre halves in the Premier League, and he's not one of the best centre halves in world football. And together with William Saliba, have a case to be the best defensive duo in the Premier League and in world football. Big up Gabriel. He's one that you have to have in your FPL teams, people. He's actually got 15 Premier League goals. Mudryk and Anthony could never. He has now scored 15 league goals since his Premier League debut in September, but it's also the defensive metrics which do very well. Now, I've got no qualms about Gabriel being man of the match. He's the poster boy, and he obviously got us the 3 points. But I personally would give it to Saliba, if I'm honest with you, because I think if you look at the initial period in the game, he made some fantastic tackles. He bailed us out, and Saliba is just being Saliba, if I'm brutally honest with you. 2 Rolls Royces, how greedy. Carrying on that theme with our defense, naturally you need them to stand up tall in a game of this magnitude, especially because we're missing the midfield engine because of our first choice options. Timber has been one of our best players this season, not just in the North London derby. The North London derby probably announced himself to the casual fan. They said we couldn't rate him because he's only played 50 minutes of Premier League football. Had he have not been injured last season, his reputation would be enhanced. He's an army knife, a Dutch army knife, much like a lot of our players. You wouldn't have thought thought that that was his first 90 minutes in a season, people, after his post ACL. He did not look like such. It was a big performance. He's had a consistent start to the season. His manager praised him. He absolutely bossed it. You know, Vicario, you're lucky that Timber is a man of God and it was the day of worship, because you almost got yourself in problems with him. He's a unicorn of a player, man. He's tigerish yet elegant. He's so intelligent. He's great at all facets of football, the defensive, the middle, and final third. So yeah, man, there was once upon a time in an Arsenal fan base that we only had one good defender. Now we've got Timber, Benjamin White, Saliba and Gabriel, Calafiori and Tomiyasu weren't really a thing because they're injured. We're spoilt for options defensively. So shout out to our defensive ranks, man, because they stood up to be counted. I'd also want to big up David Raya as well. You know, we couldn't let him down on his birthday. They did, Spurs did with Solanke. We couldn't let down David Raya. You know, David Raya has been one of our best players. I know I keep saying this, but genuinely, I believe Kai Havertz, Bukayo Saka, Timber, and David Raya have probably been the players that I feel in the 4 games so far that have stood up to be counted and been very consistent. So shout out to David Raya. He did make literally 2 big saves for us in the first half. You know, at one point in the first half, because we weren't really trying to play football, and to a degree we were struggling to get our game going owing to certain external factors going into the game. He actually made more passes in the opening 20-25 minutes than our players, which shows outfield, which shows you our game plan. So shout out to David Raya. He deserves his highlights. Now, Kai Havertz didn't score, and a year from now we're not necessarily going to remember this, but I really think Kai Havertz had a very good game. You look at his passes, his completed passes, his defensive output, his own role that he played in the build up to the goal, people, which we're going to focus on in a second. I think Kai Havertz did very well, and while he didn't get a goal or an assist, and this game won't be in any highlights package of his this season, I also think Kai Havertz did very well in that game, and he deserves some flowers from Arsenal fans, much like the majority of our team. I think Partey and Jorginho, they had a number of hairy moments in the game, but that might be an exaggeration. I think they came good, really. I think Jorginho did very well with staying next to Kulusevski, and likewise Thomas Partey with his defensive due diligence against James Maddison, and we didn't really allow too much space in behind our midfield, which was a concern of us Arsenal fans. So you could argue that there's still life in the old dogs. You could argue that they're not quite finished. And again, I want to be wary about drawing conclusions, but we need to use this squad depth. So to know Jorginho captained us against Spurs, made his first start in the season, and is really and truly a bit part player, not to downplay him, he stood up tall. And people were looking at Thomas Partey, and Thomas Partey had a great game. Of course, there's many other talking points, but I think the midfield did very well. Now, I think when you look at Martinelli's dribbling stats, when you watch the game again without emotion and look at him defensively, I think he did his job. I think he done very well. Unfortunately, it's another game where Martinelli, in terms of goal scoring, is struggling, and it still remains the question, who is going to be the first choice on that left-hand side? Raheem Sterling could have scored as well and also made his debut. Trossard had to play in the 10 role, but he's obviously a candidate. I think Martinelli is very good defensively and in midfield, but we need output. We need goal scoring, and a confident Martinelli probably scores that in Henry-esque fashion, but he did miss that opportunity. Again, we'll highlight that later in the video. Now, Tottenham Hotspur, a very possession-based side. The statistics match it. You would have seen Son and the manager Postecoglou's comments, but they're very naive, and they remind me of Arsenal of old during the early Emirates era, in the sense of possession in itself is 9/10 of the law. Possession is king, in my opinion, but it's what you do with possession, and they move the ball far too slowly to really trouble a compact, deep block from Arsenal Football Club. And also, they're just not good enough, if I'm honest with you. Now, if we obviously remove one of the footballs, I would say the first 10 minutes in particular, the only thing I asked of Arsenal is when we had the ball, could we hold on to it more? Could we start playing? And naturally, we said to Spurs, do you know what? You lot are a great side on the ball. Come and break us down. And you saw it. They would knock it side to side. They would go forward and then it's backwards. Yeah, a lot of the players got the ball. First 10 minutes in particular, every player touched the ball. They had us camped in our own half. Of course, there's a golfing class between the teams, but they could not break us down, people. They absolutely could not break us down. And they really, really struggled in that regards. We simply said, you know what? Come and break us down. Kai Havertz will engage. Trossard will engage, and naturally Partey and Jorginho would step up if required. And you would see when we sat in a really, really deeper unit, you would actually see, I actually feel on reflection watching the game, Kulusevski was getting in the pockets here, there, and everywhere. You know, they played a very attacking side. Jorginho would follow his man. Likewise, Thomas Partey would follow his man. And it was a thing where we seemed to say, do you know what? You lot can have the ball in all areas. We'll just remain compact. Now, in previous games, the ball might be out wide with Son, and either Saka or Benjamin White very early doors would engage. This time, owing probably to our defensive unit and our solidity as a team, when the ball was out wide with a guy like Son, yes, Ben White would engage, but he would actually wait and say, you know what, get involved. And then when it became the last port of entry, you would know White would go over, and he knows Saka is going to follow a man. And he also knows he's got the colossal duo in Saliba and Gabriel behind him. So I think we remained quite compact and said, you know what, if you lot are that good, break us down. The only issue I would say within the first 10 minutes is obviously when we're winning the ball back or we're clearing our lines, it's going straight back to Spurs. We needed to get a Partey on the ball, a Havertz on the ball, and try to move it. And actually on that, Kai Havertz did well in midfield anyways, but sometimes he would pull out wide. Obviously, we would go long. He would simply win a knockdown, obviously be offside there, but he would win a knockdown, and then you'd bring someone like Bukayo Saka into play, and that's how we was progressing. Or there was times Jorginho would have the ball and we'd hit Martinelli. That seemed to be the game plan from the off. Let them have possession, let them be naive, sit back. We will get an opportunity or opportunities to score, and we obviously did. You know, you can point towards several missed chances from Arsenal players, particularly in the first half, but fortunately Gabriel did the business. Now, naturally, people, in typical games, Arsenal are very aggressive with the press. We'll press from the front and we're very high up the field. You know, you'll see Martinelli, you'll see Saka, you know, you'd see Kai Havertz. You know, I know it says Trossard here, but if we assume that is, you know, Declan Rice, and we assume this is Mr. Odegaard, we'll press very, very high and try to win the ball back, people. And naturally, the whole team will naturally filter forward. Now, against Spurs in the North London derby, it was a bit different. Obviously, you keep the same principles like our defensive structure, but naturally it doesn't make sense. We haven't got the dynamism. Partey and Jorginho don't have the legs to be as aggressive as we would have if we had Partey, Declan Rice, and Odegaard, right? Now, if I move everybody back, one thing I did like is, again, in the topic of being street smart, in the same vein of we said, you know what, you want to play, you know, you want possession and you're a great possession-based side, have the ball, really, and truly do your thing. Now, Vicario isn't the best in terms of ball playing, but he's a modern day keeper, so he offers himself as a passing lane. You see the centre backs pull out wide to try and get on the ball. Their fullbacks either invert with Pedro Porro and Destiny and Doggy, or they remain high. Now, naturally, it doesn't make sense. Keeping resolute defensively and our compactness was a theme of the day. So one thing I did like is we'll say, you know what, Vicario, you lot have the ball. Vicario, Bentancur, Van de Ven, you lot have the ball up there, have the ball. But once you get into a certain zone, like let's assume it's kind of here in the half space, Partey, Havertz, even mainly really and truly Trossard and Havertz, occasionally Partey when he could nick in on Maddison, and likewise Jorginho with Kulusevski. Obviously had Martinelli even at times inverting. This is where we try and pick your pockets. This is where the press would happen. So again, it was a bit different in that we was kind of, you know, patient with the press. We'd allow Bentancur, Van de Ven to have the ball, and then we'll try and be street smart, because we know once it gets into Bentancur, it potentially gets into Maddison or Kulusevski. We will have numbers. People are still going to push agendas against Martinelli. It's another game where he's had a clear-cut opportunity and not necessarily scored. Now, I do think that opportunity in the 18th, 19th minute sums up Martinelli's struggles at this moment in time. Personally, I still think he had a great game. I think his work rate was there. I think, you know, on either side, Bukayo Saka and Benjamin White and Timber and Martinelli, they did their defensive due diligence well. They doubled up when they needed to do that. And he was still a constant threat in terms of the collective. Now, that opportunity sums up Martinelli. As you would imagine, you know, the first 20 minutes were probably the toughest for Arsenal Football Club. We were under a lot of you know, we was under a spell of possession, really. There was a lot of jabbing from Spurs. They weren't necessarily throwing punches, right? Bentancur was appealing for a free kick. It didn't happen. Martinelli is actually in his own half. Jorginho is essentially giving him the ball. Jorginho has given him the ball, and he's just, we all know Martinelli's a problem on the transition. From that point, the man's on his bike with the football, and Spurs are now in trouble at this potential occasion. And this is what Martinelli gives us. He allows us to stretch the opposition, get further up the field on the transition. Now, naturally, obviously, Spurs shirts began to recover. Naturally, you know, again, this isn't the best of example. If we just put some random names or just blue tags, really, again, it's not to make sense in terms of don't follow the Spurs names, people. It's just to paint a picture. Martinelli got us further up the pitch, right? He's then obviously eventually at some point showed great maturity to hold on to the ball and give it back to Jorginho. By that point, again, Spurs have reset. Now let's actually start to get their names in there so it makes a bit more sense to you guys. Where is Mr. Romero? Let's slap Romero in there as stated. Let's get Kulusevski there. Let's get Bentancur there. And crucially, from an Arsenal perspective, let's find Trossard. Now, say what you want about Mr. Jorginho. What you can't say about Uncle is that, you know, you might lose the physical attributes. You never lose your brain, people. By then, we've advanced up the field. Jorginho has actually found Trossard, people. He's actually done very well, in my opinion, to find Trossard. Martinelli's runs are vital, people. Martinelli is like a ghost. He's done the snaky run. Trossard's clipped it in behind. By that moment there, Martinelli is on his bike, really. And you would have seen by then, you know, there were supporting acts. Spurs are trailing in wake and at our mercy, essentially. By then, there's a supporting act with Saka. Personally, I don't think it was as clear-cut as some would make out in relation to Bukayo Saka's, you know, potentially finding Bukayo Saka, if I'm brutally honest with you. But again, not to scale, I think he has to do a lot better. Once it's become clear that he's going for the shot, he needs to channel his inner Omri and finesse that to the back post with a lot of venom. It's a tame effort. It was the right idea, wrong application. And that sums up Martinelli in the defensive middle and crucially for an inside forward, the attacking third. In the second half, naturally, you're going to be wary because this is now where it becomes where the game's going to be won or lost, right? Spurs were attacking. If you don't remember correctly, a Maddison ball went into the box. It was headed out by Partey. Trossard has hooked it. And what I think is a clearance from Trossard, he just shows his creativity. It's turned out to be a wonderful ball to Kai Havertz, who's the furthest man forward. It's completely put Spurs on the back foot defensively, and credit to Van de Ven on the recovery for somewhat delaying Kai Havertz. You would have seen Martinelli by then join the attack. Ultimately, you know, Kai Havertz found Martinelli. From that point of Martinelli, the ball eventually found Bukayo Saka. From it finding Saka, obviously, the move was delayed by then. Saka did his best to keep it alive. Ultimately, he earned the corner, which led to our goal. Now, excuse some of the names. By then, Spurs obviously made changes as they looked to get into the game. Shout out to young Ethan for not only playing in his first North London derby, but also, you know, getting some minutes in the Premier League. You know, I think he's got more North London derbies than Romero. You know, Ethan had a great little cameo in his moments. He didn't look out of place. He had some cute touches. One thing I did like, and it's nothing really of note, in the name of seeing out the game, of managing the game, of being resolute and just ultimately making sure we get the 3 points off the back of dropping 2 against Brighton and Manchester City next week. Obviously, Gabriel Jesus is significantly more experienced. So you would have seen, again, it's nothing really of note. I just liked it. And I don't know if the manager actually said it off his own back. But Ethan came on for Saka. So in theory, he's on the right-hand side. Now, if we was chasing the game, maybe he would have been out there. I like the fact that Jesus just said, you know what, young Ethan, you just stay centrally and you play a hybrid kind of 10/support striker /8.5, the Odegaard role, and I'll deal with the defending. So I did like that. So it speaks volumes of, you know, the discipline within our team and the continuity within the team spirit and everybody being a protagonist and putting pride in the shirt. For me, in conclusion, I'm happy to get the 3 points. I'm happy to shut the Spurs fans up. I'm happy to keep reminding them that North London will always be red. It will never, ever be white unless you lot get Saudi money and do something along the lines of Manchester City. So, yeah, again, football, there's a lot of games to be played. We know we should have probably equipped ourselves better in the summer transfer market. But until January at the earliest, this is what we've got. So the players that came into the side, there was every reason for the casual fan to believe Arsenal were lambs for the slaughter. Players came into the side, did well. The regulars stepped up. The defenders did very well. Benjamin White, I feel on the ball wasn't as good as he can be, but also did his thing defensively. I think I think the wingers and the fullbacks doubling up against the Spurs attackers did very well. Defensively, we did our thing. We coped with the imbalance in midfield. Mikel Arteta tailored the pressing, the spaces, the compactness, the deep blocks, everything that we needed to do going into this game. It worked. We got the 3 points. We kept a clean sheet. And, you know, we've got a bit of feel-good factor going into this week ahead of Atalanta and obviously Manchester City, which is a different ball game. Again, Spurs are naive. In many ways, they remind me of what Arsenal used to be in that they don't play as slick with the football than us as we did. They don't pass with enough intention, intensity and invention, but they do have a lot of the possession. That doesn't correlate to anything. You need the most important stat in football is, have you scored more than your opponent? Are you getting the 3 points? Possession in isolation means nothing. We know Spurs, you know, will get caught on the transition, which happened for a number of our chances and actually what led to the goal we scored. We know they can't defend from set pieces. And if you watch the game again, Romero really struggled marking Gabriel in the corners we had prior to the one where he obviously scored, which was a bit of a different run from Gabriel. So shout out the set piece gaffer. We exploited their weaknesses. We focused on our strengths. We didn't give nothing away defensively. We were very street smart and calculated. And I think it's a performance that we can come to expect. Of course, I want to see Arsenal firing on all cylinders, scoring a million goals, playing silkiness. But realistically, you can't do that for 38 games. So for me, so far, regardless of how the season pans out, how we got out of jail against Aston Villa and how we've performed against Spurs, we did very well. And I'm just clocking, did we keep 2 clean sheets? I could be wrong on the Villa game, but it just goes to show our away form has been amazing. Our record against the top 6 has been good. And there's a lot of building blocks. And also we had to cope with injuries, as we know, people. In fact, since both players have actually been at the club, that was the first time Arsenal have been without Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard in a Premier League 11. Our win rate in the competition with both starting is 73%. Now, we want to see them back sooner rather than later, but you have to cope with key players not being there. Arsenal have also won 6 consecutive Premier League away games for the first time since March to September 2013, when we won 8 in a row under Arsene Wenger. And we've also, as you know, 3 consecutive away North London derbies have ended in Arsenal winning for the first time since 1988. So the first time actually in my lifetime. I was born in 95. 3 of Arsenal's last 4 Premier League goals against Spurs have come from corners. Only 3 of our previous 88 in such North London derby league goals had come from a corner before we got Mr. Nicholas Hover, our set piece gaffer. And we actually have more wins at the Tottenham Stadium in just 5 years than Spurs have at the Emirates in 18 years. That's more than in their previous 17 visits, people, or our 17 visits, which crazy, isn't it, really and truly? So yeah, street smart performance, 3 points. We're happy. Now it's time to focus on the Champions League. Don't forget to let me know your thoughts. Like, comment, and subscribe. God bless you all for listening. Peace.
Do you know Tottenham? What? Tottenham Hotspur? Totspur? No.
What's that?
You never heard of them?
No.